Most people like to believe the world is simple. Good people do good things, and bad people do bad things. And the monsters we fear must come from somewhere far away, as if they're a different species entirely. But then you learn about someone who grew up in a perfectly normal home, someone with friends, family, church on Sundays, somebody who looked ordinary, and yet they became the kind of monster we can barely wrap our minds around. And suddenly the question becomes unavoidable. What actually creates a monster? Is it evil, something you're just born carrying inside you? Or is it something the world slowly builds, piece by piece, until the person you were supposed to be is unrecognizable? To understand this, we have to start with the part no one likes to talk about, the way the brain itself shapes emotion. There's a condition called alexithymia, which means a person can't clearly identify or express their feelings. According to the National Library of Medicine, people with alexithymia often struggle to differentiate physical sensations from emotional experience and have reduced activation in regions tied to empathy and self-awareness. They aren't heartless, they're emotionally blind. Their inner world is quiet, muted, and hard to navigate. And when a person struggles to understand their emotions, they can struggle to regulate them. That blank emotional landscape is not destiny, but it is dangerous soil, and anything can grow there. Now, before we talk about serial killers, we have to talk about duplicates, people whose lives became accidental scientific experiments long before they knew it. Take the Jim twins. According to the Minnesota twin study conducted by Dr. Thomas Bouchard in 1979, these identical twins were separated at birth and raised in completely different environments. And yet when they were reunited at age 39, they discovered they had nearly identical personalities, habits, careers, fears, and even the same strange quirks like naming their childhood dog's toy. They both chewed their fingernails, worked in security, both suffered migraines, both drove Chevys, both built backyard benches around trees, and even vacationed at the same beach in Florida. Dr. Bouchard concluded their similarities were too numerous to be chance, suggesting an undeniable genetic pull shaping who we become. And if environment alone shaped a person, these men should have grown into opposites, but they didn't. Their biology spoke louder than their upbringing. And then there were the triplets from Three Identical Strangers, separated intentionally for a secret psychiatric study in New York. Their lives proved the opposite side of the coin. As documentary shows, all three shared the same inborn temperament, similar humor, mannerisms, energy, but their mental health outcomes varied dramatically depending on the environment. One was raised in a wealthy, stable home, and one was raised in a working class. One struggled with depression and eventually took his own life. As documented in the film, research concluded that genetics set the stage, but environment determined vulnerability. Nature gave them the same blueprint, but nurture determined how that blueprint survived the world. Now, hold these examples in your mind and look at serial killers through the same lens. Some are shaped by trauma, some are shaped by biology, some are shaped by both. Take Ted Bundy. In his final interview with Dr. James Dobson in 1989, Bundy insisted, "I grew up in a wonderful home with two dedicated and loving parents," he said. "I was not physically abused, and I was not emotionally abused." Bundy destroys the myth that all killers come from horror. When asked where his darkness came from, he described something inside him that terrified even him. He said, "It was like being possessed by something so awful and alien. The next morning I would wake up in horror," and he spoke of a compulsion, a building up of destructive energy, and admitted that after killing he felt horrified. That isn't the language of a man who feels nothing. That is the language of a man split in two, somebody emotionally fractured, possibly alexithymic, who could not intercept his own internal signals. According to that interview, Bundy also said that violent pornography acted like fuel, something that reshaped his fantasies into behaviors and eroded his inhibitions. That is nature meeting nurture, colliding at full force. Now, compare Bundy to BTK, Dennis Rader, who described his crimes with chilling detachment. In his 2005 confession, Rader said, "I had what I called an X factor, a tendency to be a predator." He explained that he compartmentalized his life: the church volunteer, the husband, the father, and then the killer. He told police, "I had a desire, a sexual fantasy. I had to fulfill that fantasy. There was no remorse in the classical sense." Rader lived two lives, one ordinary, one monstrous. His words demonstrated something philosophical. Identity is not fixed. A person can maintain a socially acceptable mask while nurturing a private universe of violence. And then we have Jeffrey Dahmer. In his interview with Inside Edition in 1993, Dahmer explained his motive with haunting clarity. He said, "I wanted to keep them with me. I didn't want them to leave." He described an emotional emptiness, a loneliness so consuming that he tried to create permanent companionship. He said he committed his crime so he wouldn't feel abandoned again. Dahmer becomes the embodiment of philosopher Menge's belief that humans are shaped by environment, that emotional starvation can twist the heart. Dahmer's crimes were horrific, but his motives reveal a wounded psychology rather than a purely predator one. So now we have Bundy, Rader, Dahmer, and earlier, the Jim twins and the three identical strangers. All of them tell us the same uncomfortable truth. Humans are not born blank. Biology whispers from the beginning, but environment decides which whispers become screams. Neuroscience supports this complexity. According to the Journal of Neuroscience, many violent offenders show reduced activity in the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for fear and empathy. Other studies from the University of Wisconsin show underactivity in the prefrontal cortex, our impulse control center. But here's the twist. Millions of people have these same brain differences and never commit a violent act. So biology loads the gun, but something else decides if it will fire. Philosophers have wrestled with this for centuries. Some, like Mengzi, argue humans are inherently good, but corrupted by environment. Others, like Zunzi, claim humans are born selfish and must be shaped into goodness. Mandela once said, "No one is born hating another person. People must learn to hate." But if people must learn to hate, why do some feel it without being taught? Why do some, like serial killer Samuel Little, describe killing as feeling like heaven, as he told the FBI? Why did he feel no remorse, only pleasure? That is something environmental trauma cannot produce alone. That is a nervous system wired differently from birth. And yet, nature is not fate. Rader, Bundy, Dahmer, they all made choices. Some people are born with darker impulses. Some are born with emotional blind spots. Some are born with a brain that doesn't process empathy the way most humans do. But choice is the threshold every one of them crossed. They chose to turn fantasy into violence. They chose to act. So what creates a monster? It is never just one thing. A monster is not simply born nor simply built. A monster is a perfect storm, a predisposition, an influence, an emptiness, a trigger, and a choice. Keeping society safe means understanding all of these pieces, not just the ones that are comforting to believe. When we look at the Jim twins and three identical strangers, we see nature shaping personality with eerie force. When we look at Bundy, Dahmer, and Rader, we see nature and nurture colliding. If we ignore either side, we blind ourselves. We don't prevent future violence by pretending killers are supernatural anomalies. We prevent violence by studying the way nature and nurture interact, by understanding emotional disorders like alexithymia, by supporting mental health in childhood, by recognizing when people struggle to feel empathy, and by reducing the environment factors that can activate predispositions during development. So are monsters born, or are they made? The truth is haunted and human. Some people come into this world with quieter emotional wiring, blank inner landscapes, or reward systems that misfire. Others are shaped by pain, loneliness, or neglect. But the most terrifying monsters are not the ones who were simply born wrong, nor the ones who were simply broken by the world. The scariest monsters are the ones who stood at the crossroads between who they were wired to be and who they chose to become, and walked willingly into the dark. And if we refuse to understand that darkness, we'll never stop it. Thank you.